Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 27 series, Rescue the Rockies. And we've just gotten to free agency filings here in the very early stages of this 2044 to 2045 offseason. The new version of the game definitely is interesting. These new difficulty settings, whether the All-Star or the Hall of Fame level, definitely are going to make playing the game differently in 2027, or in version 27 more accurately, but hopefully we will still be playing this version in early 2027. A lot of interesting feedback from members of the Worldwide Scouting Department, Darkosis, Sage Dirks, Patrick DeBonis, on the settings they're using or planning on using, some of the early things that they've encountered in OOTP 27, and their thoughts on strategies going forward. And broadly, I agree with it. I think at either the All-Star or the Hall of Fame settings, where free agents are going to be materially less likely to sign with your team, or they're going to be wanting much more money from your team. A lot of different levers that I haven't necessarily pressed as hard in the past that I think will be important in the game going forward, and these were some of the things that Sage Dirks, Darkosis, and Patrick DeBonis and others have been talking about in comments to recent episodes in the tutorial we put out a few days ago, looking specifically at our team and what the costs would look like under the different settings in OOTP 27. I think certainly signing very young players, or players who aren't even major league players yet and are still just prospects, to long contracts and rolling the dice that it will become team friendly is a lever that's going to be increasingly important. Being more aggressive on the waiver wire, probably a lot to be said about being more aggressive in the trade market. If somebody signs a good player at a decent value that might be $10 or $15 million a year better than you would be able to get them for, and there's still several years left in that contract, might be more worthwhile to ship them a few prospects for that player to save money. I think there's potentially going to be a more regular churn of players through your roster. It's going to be very hard, I think, even with a higher budget team, to keep everyone who's coming up as a potential free agent. I think being more creative in terms of long contracts for mediocre or average type players and getting them locked in at a decent number might help. I think being more aggressive in terms of minor league contracts with major league options will likely help you fill some of the inevitable gaps on the roster that might end up arising. And there's some other levers to potentially push as well that I'm sure I've thought about and others have thought about that I'm just not thinking of right now. Also wanted to note on the topic of the tutorial video that we put out on free agent costs on the new setting, got some valuable feedback from one of the game developers, Will Bay, in the comments to that episode from a couple of days ago. Always great to hear from the folks at OOTP and get the true interpretation of what's happening. So I'd suggest, if you're interested in that, go and look at Will Bay's comments to that last tutorial episode that we put out 2 days ago. Essentially, as we knew, players are going to view people-controlled teams as a less attractive destination, and that's why they might be looking for more money, might be willing to sign for fewer years. Going to cost you more to bring those types of players on board. But Will also kind of addressed the volatility that I saw, which I thought was very interesting, in what the players of various skill levels are demanding at the various difficulty settings. And he essentially confirmed that their existing personality traits are going to have a pretty material impact, whether it's things like loyalty, playing time, their role on the team, whether or not they have a high opinion of themselves. Those things are all factoring into what the demand is from the players for your team, which is pretty interesting. Also noted that the default settings were essentially going to be a bit more difficult in 27 than they were in the previous version of the game. So the default AI difficulty also going to be harder this year, and in conjunction with those All-Star and Hall of Fame settings, definitely going to be a new and interesting challenge. Need to spend a lot more time with the game, which hopefully I'll be able to do in the coming weeks before we begin our long play series. But I am maybe waffling a bit on the Hall of Fame versus the All-Star setting. I think I want to ratchet it up from what we've done in the past, which is the Major League setting, essentially based on what we've heard from OOTP. But I do feel like the Hall of Fame setting is going to be such a dramatic change to the game that I want to get to know more about it. Will show right now one of the things that's making me perhaps a little bit less enthusiastic about it. We have coming up next season one of the top players in our organization, Carlos Bear Barrel Davila, who's in his final arbitration year this year, set to become a free agent, and we are on the Hall of Fame setting right now, and he's looking for 5 years at an average of over $50 million a year to sign an extension. Bear Barrel's definitely a very good shortstop, two-time Gold Glove winner each of the last 2 years, and he was also an All-Star once in his career. So, a very good Major League player, but outside of that 2042 season, when he did put up a massive 7.6 WAR, over his other 4 Major League seasons, he's had WARs of 2.8 to 4.8, so he's been a very good major leaguer, but not a great major leaguer. So $50 million a year for him in the context of a $280 million budget and a payroll that right now, even though we have pared scouting and player development back to the lowest levels that we've seen in probably a decade at this point, is a little over $200 million. Basically spending 25-ish% of my payroll on one player. That's extreme. No doubt about it. I mean, I think you even look at the Dodgers and what they've done in real life with Ohtani and the way that they structured that contract, and I don't think they're even willing to spend 20 or 25% of their money on one player. So the Hall of Fame setting will definitely make the game more challenging, and it'll definitely make the way to play it different. And I talked about some of those aspects earlier. But it might be so different, and it might kind of require just for a player running through the guys in their minimum salary years and arbitration years and then just constantly churning them over, other than maybe one or possibly two cornerstone players that you can build around and follow their careers throughout your organization. And I'm just ultimately questioning whether that's going to be as fun as I want and the engagement that I want. Like I said, we're in extremely early stages of playing around with the Hall of Fame versus the All-Star settings for me, just kind of sharing my thoughts in real time. If we were to go, just for context, since I haven't shown this before, but if we were to move down to the All-Star settings and then look at bringing Bear Barrel Davila back, drops down to 5 years, $47 million a year. So saving around $5 million a year on that setting, take things to the next level, back to the majors default setting, which is more in line with traditional OOTP over the last few years. And Bear Barrel Davia willing to sign a 9-year contract at under $40 million in those settings. So $12, $13 million a year less than what he was looking for on the Hall of Fame setting. Still obviously a significant commitment for any team to make, but just a big difference. So something that I'm going to continue thinking about. Love hearing what others are doing with their games. A lot of decisions to make going forward. Given that we did make that qualifying offer to our closer Eric Schweitzer that he accepted, our financial flexibility is really limited. Did look at some of the trade options, including the catcher from Boston, Mr. Heath, that we saw at the end of the last episode. Nothing I really want to do right now. I think it's very conceivable that we do end up moving on from Schweitzer and the $23.4 million he's set to make this year if we can find an interesting offer. But at this point, I think I'm inclined to wait a few weeks, maybe shop him more aggressively during the winter meetings and see if perhaps there's something interesting we can do there. So essentially what that means with the money we've caught out of scouting and player development and the limited money that we've got available right now, not going to necessarily be a very busy offseason. We've talked in the past about outfield and catcher as two positions we're going to need to focus on. And we have made minor league contract with major league options offers to a couple of outfielders who could be useful to us. 36-year-old center fielder Kyle Greschak, wrecked physically. Right-handed hitter, is still pretty good against left-handed pitching. Not really, honestly, someone you'd want to be playing given his average defensive outfield skills against right-handed pitching. So he's a platoon-type guy, 36 years old, wrecked physically, but only looking for a little over $2 million as a potential minor league contract with major league options. Similar situation from the younger Tony Biggie Lamone, another guy who's a right-handed hitter, fragile physically, another guy who's very playable against left-handed pitching, not really playable against right-handed pitching at this point in his career, coming off of a season where he was basically a league average player. Wouldn't mind having the option to bring either of these guys on as a fourth or fifth outfielder for us. We've also talked last episode about the fact that one of the top prospects in our organization, Luis Vera, is going to have a real good shot at making the 26-man roster as a 21-year-old out of spring training next year, because two of the top outfield or overall free agents out there, Chris Kuhn and Mike Castro, are both leaving our team, which is opening up some spots. The market for catchers is pretty weak. My hope is that even though Tyler Berry has that very high demand for us, given that he's essentially a backup catcher or a platoon guy playing against left-handed pitching, maybe he lingers on the market a little bit longer and his demand even for our team comes down. Speculating that perhaps patience may also be a strategy with the All-Star or the Hall of Fame settings, and maybe you can just wait some people out and not necessarily get your first choice, not necessarily know exactly what your roster is going to look like by mid-December, but maybe a little bit of patience with some of these players helps as well. But at least in the very early stages of free agency, the goal is just to sign one or both of Greschak and Lamone to at least give us some legitimate options for fourth or fifth outfielders, guys who could platoon for us and start against left-handed pitching, and bolster the roster in a somewhat more cost-effective way going forward. And we've simmed ahead a couple of weeks. I don't know if the general disdain that other players and free agents have for human-run organizations impacts their response time, but haven't even heard anything from either Greshchak or Limon on those minor league contracts with major league options that we had offered to each of them. And we've gotten to the start of the winter meetings. I did actually hear from both Greshchak and Limon today that our offers are the best that they've received, and if they don't receive anything better, they will sign with us. That is a familiar phrase for us to hear, but certainly think that as far as supplementing our fourth and fifth outfielders, either of those guys could be a pretty interesting option for us. So hopefully we'll get a transaction done with at least one of them to bolster our 26-man roster. Going to spend some time shopping our closer, see what the market looks like for Schweitzer at this point. And not all that different than the way that it looked before. The Red Sox aren't interested. You can see there are players we could bring on board, including our former outfielder, Tev Rumler, a guy we traded many years ago to the Braves as part of that Bob Russell deal. He's making decent money now. Looks like for the most part it's more expensive players we could get in return, but still could free up a little bit of financial flexibility by getting Schweitzer off the books. And clearly there's also deals to be made that aren't going to be involving the players who have been offered to us here by shopping him. We'll just have to get a little more creative to make one of those happen. So going to spend a little time now figuring out if we're going to really get Schweitzer off the books, or are we just going to basically run back all except Chris Kennedy of a pitching staff that was probably the best in baseball last year, and rely a little bit more on pitching and defense to hopefully potentially win in 2045 than we even have in previous seasons. And we have found a trade. What we ended up paying makes me feel a little sick, but that's kind of the nature of the beast, and it did free up some financial flexibility with us. Not that it's going to be enough that we can be active players at the middle to top end of free agency this year, but hopefully at least gives us the flexibility when we start getting into June and July of next season to supplement the team with some rentals if need be. But we packaged our closer, 28-year-old Eric Schweitzer, who's an outstanding closer, but that $23.4 million QO that we gave him when we were playing around at the end of a previous episode, a little more than we really want on the books for him this year. But certainly an asset that we've lost, and we also had to include the 26-year-old pitcher Makoto Hirota. Was just a couple years ago one of the top prospects in our organization. Started 32 games for us last year, 10-13 record with a 4.44 ERA. He's puts up WARs of about 1 each of his 2 seasons in the majors. So he is a good, solid major league pitcher, back end of the rotation or a long reliever. But we've got a lot of pitching talent that's not too far from being able to help us. I talked a little earlier about with the new settings in OOTP 27, that kind of churn between experienced players and prospects may get a bit more aggressive. And we're certainly seeing that with the fact that Vera's probably going to make the major league roster at 21. And we're getting rid of these guys in their mid to late 20s in the case of Hirota and Schweitzer. Just felt like, although we think Hirota's still got potential for his stuff to be average, he's 26 years old at this point. He's spent 2+ years in the majors. Our scout keeps saying he's got a lot of untapped potential, but he hasn't realized that yet with us. Don't love the outspoken personality with the low adaptability and baseball IQ, and felt that we could just leverage him and needed to leverage him to also get this deal done. Certainly with both Hiroto and Schweitzer gone, joining Chris Kennedy, leaving our pitching staff from last year, a closer, setup man / stopper, and a guy who started 32 games for us are all gone. So we've definitely weakened the pitching staff. But the game's supposed to be a little more challenging, and the decisions that we face are going to be a little more challenging with these new settings, and we're kind of seeing that already. One thing that I did mean to mention earlier when I was talking about the comment that Will Bay left on the difficulty settings and the influence of personality factors on player decision making. For a long time, I've kind of prioritized 4 personality traits, being work ethic, leadership, adaptability, and baseball IQ, over the other 2 personality traits, which have been loyalty and financial ambition. But knowing the way 27 works and knowing that personality factors are influencing what people ask for, and knowing that on the All-Star or the Hall of Fame settings, those demands that you receive are going to be higher than they've ever been in the past, I do think I'm going to be increasingly interested and focused on players' loyalty and financial ambition to an extent that I didn't care about it as much in the past, because if you can get someone with higher loyalty and lower financial ambition, that could really mean serious money, and the difference between being able to possibly bring back someone who's a franchise cornerstone or needing to move on from that person as soon as they're ready to hit free agency. So not going to be a determining factor for me, but something that I do anticipate caring a bit more about here in OOTP 27. The guy that we got in return for Schweitzer and Hirota, and again, I don't love the trade in terms of the talent that was involved, is catcher Tyler Laquette, 27-year-old out of the Atlanta organization. He was their regular catcher last year, hit .216 with 15 homers and 54 ribbies. Below average offensive player, but still put up a WAR of close to 3. Good at blocking and framing, average arm. Looking at his ratings, anticipate that he'll be our starter next year against left-handed pitching. We still have the left-handed hitting Arellano, who will be our starter against right-handed pitching. Arellano could be moving on from us at some point, and Laquette looks like a guy who would certainly be capable of being an everyday starter for us. Has this upcoming year and then one more arbitration-eligible year after it. We did also get the Braves to keep about half of his contract, which helps a bit for this year. So, unfortunately for us, moving on from Schweitzer and Hirota, really a salary and quality dump, but Laquette does let us fill an important gap on our roster, and hopefully we'll be able to get one or both of those experienced outfielders that we've made minor league offers to signed in the not too distant future. Better financial position now, though. Scouting and player development bumped both of those back up. Again, not as high as we have been in the past, but we do actually put ourselves in a situation where heading into 2044, we've got money available, as I said, to bring on players close to the trade deadline, maybe to help us sign guys that we draft, but we're doing this at the expense of losing Hirota and Schweitzer, on top of losing Kennedy and Kuhn and Castro. So the roster definitely not going to be as strong as the one that won it all for us last year. Or I guess it's still this year. Still 2044 at this point. And we've simmed past the winter beatings. Not that we've got the money to afford Castro, but let's see if his demands have changed. And it does look like his demand is down from where it was, only looking for $40 million. He was up in closer to $60 when the offseason began. So that could be a point in favor of being patient and trying to wait. Obviously, a lot of guys have already come off the market and more could. Just want to make sure. I don't think I've looked at anything different with... Yeah, we're still on the Hall of Fame setting. Just wanted to make sure. I didn't think I had tweaked anything when I was looking at the differences between contracts since the last time we checked in, but just wanted to make sure that that $40 million figure for Castro is still on the Hall of Fame setting. So patience, perhaps, also a tool in the toolbox in these free agent periods. If some of these guys that really dislike the human-run organizations linger on the free agent market for a month or two, perhaps their willingness to sign will get higher, as it should. So those of you who have followed me in the past know that I generally like to figure out what my team is going to look like next year as soon as possible, lock guys in the early stages of free agency, and then maybe supplement a bit with a trade or a minor league free agent signing when the calendar gets into February, right before spring training. And may have to be a little more flexible in my approach and willing to have some uncertainty about what that 26-man roster might look like next year, linger for a bit longer to ensure that we can get some better values going forward, perhaps. Chris Kuhn's offer also looking materially less than it was, or his demand looking materially less than it was at the beginning of free agency. So that's good to know, that although players may ask for everything from you right when the offseason is getting underway, they seem to be getting increasingly realistic as the musical chairs start to get filled, and they want to ensure that they're making massive money, but not necessarily stupid money, rather than much less money when next season rolls around. And a rare circumstance for us in the Rule 5 draft this year, we actually picked a player. We did lose a player also, starting pitcher Mike Martin, who was with us in AAA last year. 7-6 record with an ERA of just over 5. Did put up a 3.2 WAR, but his stuff is nothing special. He is a guy who has had some major league experience, but a guy that we signed to a minor league contract last year and weren't going to put on the 40-man roster. We did pick up the second baseman Gregorio Camacho from the Seattle Mariners organization, 23-year-old infielder, capable of playing anywhere in the infield, although outside of first base, he's just a guy, if that, at every position. A little bit of pop in his bat, right-handed hitter, looks like a pretty similar player against lefties and righties, arguably a little bit better against left-handers as far as his ratings. Don't necessarily think he's going to make the team for us as a sixth infielder. We do have guys like Nick Dyer, Luis Escobar, Mario Manriquez, Steve Wheats competing for some of those spots as an infielder on our team. But another body to have in camp with us, especially in a year where we've got to be more and more focused on expenses. Figured it was at least worth having him in spring training with us, and if he doesn't make the roster, we'll send him back to the Mariners. And good news, we have signed both of the veteran outfielders to minor league contracts with major league options. Kyle Greschak, again, a guy who could be a starter for us against left-handed pitching. Acceptable defensively, wrecked physically at this point, 36 years old, but Again, a guy's a fourth or fifth outfielder who might be able to help us, and similar with Tony Limon. Similar profile, really like his bat against left-handed pitching. He's got even more dramatic splits than Greshchak does. Limon really like his outfield range. He actually won a Gold Glove in left field back in 2039. His error rating and his arm are below average, but he's younger than Greshchak, not as banged up at this point, and for the role we envision, playing primarily against left-handed pitching, arguably, I think Biggie Limon has a better chance of making the 26-man roster at this point. But in a year where we really needed to supplement our outfielders with both Castro and Kuhn set to depart, glad to bring a couple guys on board who can now compete for roster spots in spring training. And at numbers that aren't going to be all that crazy. Don't know if I ever showed you that, but Limon would be $2.2 million based on what we offered to him if he makes the major league roster, and Greshchak also $2.2 million with an incentive for 550 plate appearances, which is almost impossible to envision him getting with us. And we've made it to the new year. Get mid-semester report cards on the players that we have in the development lab. Luis Vera frustrated with his bat speed program. Manny Hernandez frustrated with his control program. Tom McNeil frustrated with his gap power, and Jim Johnson frustrated with his control program. Chris Davis actually struggling with his control program. Fortunately, a few positive things. Alex Gomez on track, improving his quality of contact. CJ Kuhn's excelling in pitch movement, and Ernesto Menjivar on track with his increased movement programs. So looking like potentially 3 successful programs. Davis, who's struggling, isn't too far off, potentially at least not having any opportunity to regress. Certainly would love if Jim Johnson or the Secretary of Defense, Luis Vera, particularly given that we see the 21-year-old having a big role in the majors next year, get things moving in a better direction over the coming couple of months and end up being successful. At this point, 4 successful programs would probably be viewed as a victory as far as I'm concerned. And 2 players enshrined in Cooperstown this year, both on their first year on the ballot with huge numbers. Elly De La Cruz, 99.6% of the vote, put up a career with 457 homers, almost 1,400 ribbies for the Cincinnati Reds, as well as a 2-year detour in Texas for him. Led the league in steals 4 times during his career, 740 total, and an 80.4 WAR for De La Cruz, who was your NL MVP in 2031, also won a Gold Glove and was a perennial All-Star and Silver Slugger. Joan Duran, the outstanding reliever, also in the Hall of Fame after a nomadic career after he left Minnesota. Also spent time with Baltimore, Texas, the Dodgers, Washington, Miami, the Yankees, Atlanta, San Diego, and Philadelphia before finishing up where it all started at the major league level with the Twins at the age of 41. Led the league in saves 6 times over the course of his career, 533 saves total. Struck out over the course of his career over 1,300 batters, and looks like 1,200 innings, although I don't love the way some of this stuff is cut off here right now. Still got to tweak some of my settings to make them look better here in the new game. WAR of over 30 for his career. So really nice run for Joan Duran. Ended up being a 5-time Mariano Rivera Award winner, along with a 9-time All-Star. Honestly, the 99% support seems a little high for the nature of his career, but congratulations to fictional Elly De La Cruz and fictional Joan Duran on being inducted in fictional Cooperstown. You can see some prominent guys today both Skubal and Skeens in the headlines over the past week for their work, or in some cases lack of work, in the World Baseball Classic, end up being pretty far off Hall of Fame induction with the way that their careers turned out in this world. Our former shortstop Ezekiel Tuvar, who had a nice run for us over the years, also not a serious candidate to be inducted in the Hall of Fame. Same thing with our former catcher Drew Romo. And Chris Kuhn officially gone. He's signed with the Indianapolis Racers, 4 years, about $14 million a year. So actually a pretty reasonable contract for what he is at this point, with the fact that we've got those two guys signed to the minor league deals with major league options. Bringing Kuhn back was not a serious consideration. Still a productive hitter against right-handed pitching, but 32 years old, not special defensively, and although he did lead the league in steals a year ago, he was basically a league average offensive player. I think we probably have gotten about the best out of him with 3 straight 20-plus home run seasons while he was our number 3 hitter against right-handed pitching in Colorado. And Mike Castro's demand, if you're wondering, has actually crept up to $44 million a year. Certainly not realistic for us to be thinking about bringing him back at this point. Taking a look at some of the pitchers who are still available. Chris Kennedy still looking for crazy money, over $35 million a year. He remains on the market. Former closer Adonis Valaire looking for $5 million. Former stopper Justin Gibson also looking for about $5 million. Where those guys are in their career, in their mid to late 30s, and with where we are with our pitching staff, although the numbers are certainly affordable for us at this point, not necessarily thinking that we're going to aggressively try to bring either of them on board. And Chris Kennedy, after a fantastic run with us, officially gone. Signed for $28.4 million a year over 2 years to go with the Dodgers. So we will be facing him in the division. The Dodgers playing better last year than they had over the past few previous seasons. Were among our top competitors for the best record in baseball last year, and they're adding a really good pitcher in Chris Kennedy, albeit one who's missed most of each of the last 2 seasons with some pretty significant injuries. And we've made it to the beginning of the international free agent signing period. If you're wondering, Mike Castro still on the market looking for $44 million a year. And with the trade that we made for LeCuit, re-signing Tyler Berry, much less of a priority for us, but he's still looking for $8.5 million, at least from our Rockies. And as has generally been the case in the IAFA period, we have as little money to spend as anybody, $5.5 million for this IAFA period. Probably will do what we often do and go after just one big ticket item. Very interesting one among the pitchers, starting pitching prospect Javi Bluto Perez, almost 17 years old, out of the Dominican. Fragile physically, already at the age of 16, which we don't love, but we think his stuff, his movement, and his control could all be well above average. Potential for a nice 4-pitch arsenal with a sinker, slider, and fastball that are all well above major league average. Potential for an average-ish changeup as well to get in there. Throwing in the low 90s now, think he can eventually touch 100 miles on the radar gun. Real high scouting accuracy on his stuff, as you can see, not quite as high on some of the other traits. Medium development risk, but we think he's got an incredibly high ceiling if he were to reach his full potential. Pretty much blows away all of the other pitchers in this class in terms of where we think his ceiling is. And there are 9 position players that we have been scouting in our most recent training camps. Shortstop Jose Roldan, 17-year-old Venezuelan. Think that the bat could be average-ish to well above average in all of the categories. Potentially outstanding gap power, although his speed is below average. But a little bit of pop in his bat, ability to draw some walks, and a glove that could play just about anywhere in the field. He's listed as a shortstop now. Realistically, probably more of a third base or perhaps even a first base type at the major league level, depending on how well his bat ends up developing. Looking for $2.2 million. Another middle infielder, second baseman Frank Zavala, dual Venezuelan and Spanish citizenship. Average-ish contact, but the gap power, the home run power, and the eye could all be tremendous. Not a very good defensive player, unfortunately, and he does have that very high development risk. Big chance that he won't reach his full potential, but good speed and outstanding bunter, like the high work ethic. A lot to like about Zavala, but certainly a high volatility prospect, and also a material demand at almost $3.5 million. Catcher Alex Navarro, a switch-hitting backstop. Think that the contact and the eye can both be above average. The gap power average-ish, and not a lot of pop in the bat. Pretty mediocre defensive profile. Decent at framing, but a below-average arm. Probably not the direction we'll go. Do like the durable switch-hitting catcher, though. But for $3 million, I could see us ending up in a different direction. First baseman Manny Lopez, a very well-balanced bat. Not the greatest defensive player in the history of baseball, but certainly it looks like with his 6'4" height and the ratings he has that he can be a more than competent first baseman. Left-handed hitter who we think could be, as I said, slightly above average to above average in everything if he reaches his full potential. $3.2 million demand for Lopez. Another first baseman, Jordan Grin Zanudo. Average-ish contact, average-ish gap power, but we think the home run power and the eye could both be tremendous. Mentioned earlier that we're probably going to factor financial ambition and loyalty a little more into some of our decision making than we have in the past, given that the number of dollars and the likelihood that potential free agents will sign with us are factors we need to think about a little more seriously in OOTP 27. So those ratings certainly work against him. Not a great defensive player, but if he does reach his full potential with 80 power and a 70 eye, more than happy to have him playing first base or the DH. Big demand from him at $4 million. Right fielder Manny Rivera, very well-balanced hitting profile. We think the contact, the gap power, and the eye can all be borderline world-class. Has really good speed. The home run power, only average-ish. We do have very high overall scouting accuracy on him. Negatively, for Sonny Jim, a lot of negative personality traits, high financial ambition, low leadership, loyalty, and work ethic, kind of an average-ish defensive profile. Love the bat if he reaches his full potential, but with some of those personality quirks and the fact that his $4.2 million demand is as high as anybody in the class, probably not the direction we'll end up going. Catcher Min Jun Bong, also known as Shakes, looks like a slightly above average defensive catcher who also could have a above average bat, like the high work ethic and baseball IQ. Pretty good combo here. His bat could actually be really interesting for a catcher if he reaches his full potential. You tie that in with ratings that are a bit above average defensively, and the right-hander out of South Korea certainly has a chance to be a pretty interesting player. But the two highest guys on our list, at least according to their potential and our scouting reports, are a couple of guys looking for about $2.5 million a year. Shortstop Victor Flex Marquez, average-ish in terms of the contact, but we think the gap power, the home run power, and the eye could all be borderline ridiculous. Capable of playing multiple positions in the infield, probably mostly a natural third baseman or first baseman. Could also play a corner outfield position if you needed him to. Ultimately, with Marquez, it's going to come down to the bat, and certainly could be an exceptional one if he reaches his full potential. And last but not least, second baseman Jose Lopez. Very high overall scouting accuracy on him in a bat that looks potentially legendary if he could reach his full potential. I think the contact could be well above average, and we think that the gap power, the home run power, and the eye could all be borderline exceptional. Like his speed and decent base running instincts at this point, high adaptability, low financial ambition, not a great defensive player, probably a natural first baseman or left fielder. Could play him at right field, could play him at third base, and obviously if that bat fully develops and the glove doesn't, he could be an absolutely incredible switch-hitting designated hitter if he reaches his full potential, but just barely 16 years old. A lot of growth that's going to need to happen, but certainly Put Lopez is a pretty interesting prospect, particularly with that $2.6 million demand. And you may remember last year that we tried to thread a needle with two prospects that we really liked, splitting the money among them. And I don't think we're going to be successful doing it again this year, but we're going to try it to see if maybe we can make it happen. We're going to end up offering both Lopez and Marquez money. More interested in Lopez than Marquez, but we're going to try to see if we can bring them both on board. The OSA a little lower on both of them than we are. We're going to have to, as usual, remove some non-prospects from our international complex that have recently been recruited before we can make this move. So we are going to offer Lopez $3 million. Actually, we'll offer him $3,050,000. And then we will use the small balance we have on Mr. Marquez, just a little bit above what he's looking for. We can offer him $24.50. So I don't think we're going to pull off the daily double the same way we did a year ago, but might as well experiment. It's very unlikely we're still going to be playing with the Rockies when these guys are ready to actually produce. So might as well get a little more information about how realistic it is to try to do what we did last year. Felt like it was below a 1% success probability. Maybe we underestimated that. Certainly if they both come back and say they want more money, my inclination is going to be to give every penny that we have available to Mr. Lopez if we strike out on both of these first two attempts. And Victor Marquez has already come back to us and says that he wants more money. That's actually fine. As we talked about, Jose Lopez is the guy that I am more interested in of the two. I don't necessarily think that we're going to sign Lopez for that offer of just over $3 million. If he comes back and says he wants more money, we'll offer him every penny we have at that point, because we do think he is the premier position player in this pool, although we did really also like that starting pitcher. And not surprisingly, Jose Lopez comes back looking for more money as well. So we, as I said, hit the daily double a year ago. Figured we'd try to do it again this year, but thought it was a low probability event. He wants every penny that we've got. We're going to go ahead and meet his demand and submit that offer to him. That's the best that we can do. So hopefully we'll get Lopez locked up, because if he comes back looking for more than $5.5 million, we're going to have to make some funky trades, which generally are very expensive to try to get that money, which means we probably won't bother doing it. And unfortunately, Mr. Lopez is also coming back, said that he's got a max offer from a team that he likes more than ours. This could be not sure if the dynamic of people not liking the human run teams also applies to international amateur free agency. Have tended to have pretty good luck over the years, offering top prospects our maximum and having them come with us. Don't know if it's just a coincidence that he prefers a max offer from another team to ours this year, or perhaps it is something to do with the Hall of Fame and all-star settings in the game. But obviously need to pivot at this point away from Mr. Lopez. And we did look at the starting pitcher, Javi Perez, but he also has a max offer of $5.5 million from another team that he prefers to ours. So I do think that it seems like some of the dislike of the human teams bleeds through to the IAFA pool. Admittedly, totally anecdotal and one sample size that we're talking about at this point. We'll get to know more going forward. But certainly, if that ends up being an issue, looking for broader, more diversified classes may be the more logical approach in most IAFA periods if most of the top international amateur free agents just aren't going to like us. And unfortunately, Victor Marquez and Minjun Bong, the shortstop and catcher, both already have maximum offers from teams that they prefer to ours. We could still make a run at Manny Lopez. Really love his hitting profile, but really dislike a lot of those personality traits as we talked about. We're going to pivot to getting greedy again, potentially, which probably isn't the best move given that we know teams don't tend to like us. And we've made a $2.2 million offer to the second baseman Frank Zavala, and we've made a $2.7 million offer to the shortstop Jose Roldan. Don't know that we're going to get either of them, but certainly they're a notch lower in the pecking order than the guys that we were looking for before. Roldan's offer is more than his initial demand. Zavala's is less. He was only looking for $1.7 million, so still think the 2.2 that we came in on could be interesting to him, but we'll see how these negotiations go. And unfortunately, we've lost out on Victor Marquez, who was looking for more than we were willing to pay. Mike Castro also gone. Fans not pleased. The clubhouse, though, secretly happy that he is gone. We do get a supplemental first-round pick. Taking a look at the terms of his agreement, $36.5 million a year over 4 years. Castro been an outstanding player for us, but definitely some negative personality traits. He'll be 33 years old early next year. A little bit of a bummer to lose a guy that we spent a first-round pick on, but feel like we've gotten the best of Castro's career with our Rockies, and now we'll let him move on to the Cubs and let them pay him the big bucks. And we did, however, get the shortstop Jose Roldan signed, so not a bad secondary option for us. Still think he's got decent potential. $2.8 million for him, so we've still got $2.7 million to potentially spend on some second-tier candidates, so we'll continue to investigate the IAFA market and who's available. And we've pivoted with the last $2.7 million that we have to Vinny Romero. He said he was looking for $2.72 million, so just a little bit short with him. Really like the contact gap power and eye. The home run power certainly going to be below average, almost certainly, and the outfield abilities are not great. But a bat that could still be pretty interesting if he works out. So we'll see if we can bring him on board and ultimately pair him up with Jose Roldan as our primary focus of this IAFA period. And we've made it to the start of the preseason. And of course, after cutting our budget $20 million following a World Series win, Mr. Monfort's boosted it by $10 million now, right when the free agent market is largely done and there's not really any great opportunities for us to spend it. So certainly not ideal timing for us. We also struck out on the center fielder Vinny Romero in the IAFA pool. His demand is more than we can pay at this point. So pivoted to a couple of secondary pitchers, splitting up the money that we have left among them. We'll let you know if and when we sign somebody else. And we have finally made a second international amateur free agent signing, starting pitcher prospect Miguel Murillo. Only $1 million to get him signed. A lot of positive personality traits. Don't really know how good he's actually going to be. Don't think his stuff is anything special. But think the movement and control can both be major league average. If he reaches his full potential, there's something there that might be useful. Clearly that's a low probability for someone who's not even 17 years old yet, though. And we've added a third international amateur free agent now, Gustavo Montez, signed to a $1.2 million bonus. The shortstop looks like his contact and his gap power could both be above average. Like his speed, really like him defensively. The power in the eye, certainly nothing special, but is a third player to get signed, not the most useless potential prospect we've ever seen. And we still have, I think, $500,000 left to try to maybe add a fourth or fifth player to this year's class. And we've got our final IAFA signed, Tony Paulino. Spent the final $500,000 on him. 17-year-old Venezuelan prospect. The stuff could be decent. Question his movement and his control to a lesser extent. A lower-rated prospect that we don't know as much about, but a more diversified class in the IAFA pool for us this year compared to many previous seasons. And we've made it to the start of spring training, just one day away from finding out what happened in these long development programs. We've got 4 guys who are excelling at this point and 2 more who are on track, albeit just barely. Unfortunately, the Secretary of Defense, Luis Vera, seems like he's going to come up a little short with improving in his Generate Bat Speed program, given that he's so critical to our outfield this year, and he's also one of the top prospects in not just our organization, but all of baseball. We're hoping we might be successful with him. Also looks like Chris Davis may end up being unsuccessful with his improved control program. But one day away, and we could conceivably have 6 successful programs, so certainly not a lot for us to complain about. And spring training is officially underway. Won our first game yesterday, 3-2 against the Phillies. Also got our development lab results, and compared to where we were a couple months ago, happy with how things turned out. Honestly, compared to where we were yesterday, though, a little bit of a disappointment as we only ended up with 5 successful programs. Chris Davis and Jim Johnson, both no improvement in their improved control programs. And Luis Vera, as expected, did not improve his Generate Bat Speed program. But still 5 successful or outstanding results. Second baseman Alex Gamez improved his quality of contact, his BABIP rating going up by 5. That should be helpful to him. Outfielder Tom McNeil, current gap power improved by 10. He's off to a really nice start the first couple years of his career and becoming an increasingly important offensive player for us, so nice to see that happen. And then Manny Hernandez, one of the better young pitching prospects in our organization, improved his current control a little bit. He's one of several players who over the next year and a half, 2 years could be filling in for the fact that we did have to move on from Hirota in that trade for the catcher Laquette. Outstanding results also. C.J. Coons, another big-time pitching prospect for us. His potential and current movement improved by 5 and 10 points respectively. And the other top pitching prospect for us, Ernesto Menivar, potential movement improved a little bit, current movement improved by 10. So some really good results there for 3 of our young starting pitchers, and continue to expect that that area will remain a strength for us. Taking a look at what's going to be going on the rest of spring training in the development lab, Luis Vera going to working on his outfield defense along with Tom McNeil. Chad Prokop, who we drafted, I think it was last year, second round pick from a year ago out of Cal Davis, going to be working on his catching defense, and then a number of pitchers and infielders working on their infield defense. The pitchers C.J. Coons and Ernesto Menivar, who we also talked about recently, top 2 pitching prospects in the organization, and they both just had successful trips to the development lab. And then shortstop Jeremy Marchak, Steve Wheats, and Nick Dyer also working on their infield defense as well. So hopefully we'll have some success over these next 4 or 5 weeks during spring training with these defense programs. And most importantly, let's hope we can keep the team healthy, especially Kevin Roberts Jr., who's going to be taking over as our everyday center fielder for as long as he can remain healthy in his mid-30s. And just days into spring training, and we've already lost a pitcher. Fortunately, not a critically important one. Javon Watson, 26-year-old reliever who was a 12th round draft pick of ours 9 years ago. Spent the last couple years in AAA. Was certainly somebody who could be on our radar, particularly if we had a few injuries this year as far as getting some action in the majors. But with a torn labrum, not expecting to see him again until possibly sometime in September if the Albuquerque season is still going at that point when he's healthy. And we're more than halfway through spring training, a 9-4-4 record for our Rockies, so things going reasonably well on the field. No other major injuries, just had a less significant one. Third baseman John Jefferson, back tightness, going to impact him for a few days. Also has a strained back, 5 days there. I guess that was 5 days ago that it signed, so only 1 day left at this point. So not a major issue. He had a really nice year for us a year ago. Has always had injury issues and problems staying healthy, but probably the most productive offensive season, at least in terms of a relatively full season of his major league career last year. So hoping he can build on that here in 2045. And unfortunately, our defensive program's going pretty poorly. Everybody is frustrated. Nobody on track to have improvement this year. Doesn't really look outside of possibly C.J. Coons that anyone is at major risk of regression. And there doesn't, from my experience, tend to be too much regression with the defense programs compared to the running and then the more broad hitting and pitching programs. But certainly hope we can maybe get lucky with a guy like Nick Dyer, Tom McNeil, or maybe even Vera or Prokop, who aren't too far off from a potential successful program. Feel real good about the fact that we went 5 for 8 with successful or outstanding programs in the long trip through the development lab, and certainly would love to have something better than 0 for 8 here on the shorter trips. And we've made it through spring training other than that serious injury to Watson. Nothing major. Pat Webb, a 32-year-old who's likely to be in AAA for us, has a finger blister. But other than that, everyone else is healthy at this point. So just have to make some decisions as far as who our cuts are going to be. Taking a look at the spring training standings, finished 16-9-5. So a really nice spring overall for our Rockies in terms of the one-loss record. Brett Davis ended up with 3 saves. He's a guy who's probably not going to make the team out of spring training, but another pitching prospect, in his case a reliever who could be an important player for us at some point in the not too distant future. take a quick look at the final stages of the development lab, and unfortunately it doesn't look with 3 days left like we're going to have any successful programs. And unfortunately, CJ Coons, the outstanding young pitching prospect, is really struggling. Looks like he may have some issues. Unfortunately, always hope that maybe we get a couple of snake eyes rolls in a row and we end up with a successful program from somebody, but doesn't seem like it's going to happen this year unless we get extremely lucky these last few days as we're finalizing our 26-man roster. And we've made our big decisions as far as our 26-man roster. No real surprises as far as the starting rotation. 2043 Cy Young Award winner Jesse Hoffmeister will be our number 1 starter. 2044 Cy Young Award winner Ray Salas will be our 2nd starter. 3-time Cy Young Award winner Leo Martinez, back from the injury that cost him most of last season, will be our 3rd starter this year. Takamasa Ichimura, number 4, and Tomas Pena will be our 5th starter. So really love our starting rotation. Think that we remain stacked there, even with some turnover over the past couple of years and the trade of Hirota this offseason. Ryan Harville, with the departure this past offseason in that trade of Eric Schweitzer, going to get the opportunity to close for us this year. Setup men will be Roberto Ramirez and Matthew Hirota, the lefties, as well as Josh Joss, the veteran right-hander. Opportunity for those guys to get some more serious innings with Chris Kennedy gone from the team. Jim Johnson back in middle relief, and Jorge Pacheco back as a lefty specialist and middle reliever for us. The final 2 guys to make the roster are Steve Herbst, who we picked up a couple of years ago in a trade and wanted him to be a 4A guy, even though with injuries and a little bit of thinness at the back end of the bullpen, he spent all of last year with us in the majors. And Matthew Vance, former first-round pick, former second-round pick, I think. Yeah, second-round pick out of Cal back in 2042, gets an opportunity to be a long reliever for us this year. Those 2 spots are definitely the weakest in our entire pitching staff and our bullpen specifically, and you can see that neither Herbst nor Vance had a particularly good spring. The final 2 cuts were the 2 young, outstanding starting pitching prospects, CJ Coons and Ernesto Menivar. Basically wanted to ensure that those guys get regular starting time in AAA in the case of Coons, AA for the time being in the case of Menivar. Would anticipate that come playoff time, those guys could certainly be in the mix to be in the pitching staff and on our roster, assuming we do make the playoffs. They're both arguably better than Herbst and Vance right now, but wanted to ensure that they get a little more regular playing time than they might get working out of the bullpen at the major league level. And lineup-wise, also had 2 final cuts that were pretty tough decisions for us. The former first-round pick, Luis Escobar, and then the infielder, Nick Dyer, who spent some time with us in the majors last year, back and forth between AAA, end up being our final 2 cuts. Taking a look at the 13 players who did make the roster coming out of spring training, Alex Arellano and Tyler LeCuit will be platooning at catcher for us. Rogelio Gonzalez and Mario Manriquez and Daniel Torres all make the team. Gonzalez and Torres are more first base DH types. Mario Manriquez is actually pretty diversified in terms of the number of positions that he can play. He'll be playing first base for us against right-handed pitching and leading off. Alec Gamez will be our everyday second baseman again this year. John Jefferson will be our everyday third baseman this year. And Carlos Barrel de Villa will be our everyday shortstop and number 2 hitter. Tom McNeil, the left fielder, is going to take over as our number 3 hitter against right-handed pitching. Both of the guys we signed to minor league contracts with major league options make the team. Kyle Greschak and Tony Lamone. They will be playing left field in DH for us against left-handed pitching, Lamone hitting cleanup, Greshjak playing designated hitter for us. So looking forward to seeing what those two can do offensively. Kevin Roberts Jr. dropping in the order this year to 7th against righties and 6th against lefties, but we're going to try to see if he can be our everyday center fielder as our 36-year-old, the veteran of the team, future Hall of Famer. And our everyday right fielder is going to be the youngest guy on our roster. The right fielder, Luis Vera, has played only 11 games above Double-A. But when we look at the hole we had in the outfield, we look at his ratings, we look at his durability, top 10 prospect, and we are going to give the player who turned 21 right at the beginning of spring training an opportunity to be a everyday right fielder for us. And he actually takes over as our cleanup hitter. Roberts Jr. has been our right fielder for over a decade at this point, and our cleanup hitter, that's where Vera is going to be against right-handed pitching. He's going to hit third for us against left-handed pitching. I guess the other guy to mention as far as a late cut was the outfielder, Mr. Boyd. Switch hitter was up with us a bit last year, but he still had options. Decided that keeping Greshjak and Lamone to bat 4th and 5th for us against lefties made more sense. So excited to see what this roster can do this year against left-handed pitching, with the fact that McNeil's only going to be starting against righties this year. All righties in the batting lineup against lefties, and we do actually have 4 left-handed hitters in the lineup against righties, so hopefully we'll be able to do some damage no matter who is on the mound against us this year. And we've made it to opening day. High expectations from ownership. Just need to win it all this year. Unfortunately, those development lab trips were unproductive as far as all of the defensive programs. No improvement for anybody, and a poor result for the young pitcher C.J. Coons. No noticeable changes, unfortunately, but after a 5-for-8 performance in the long programs, we go 0-for-8 in the defensive-oriented shorter programs during spring training. Last thing we will check on before we finish up the episode is the preseason predictions. Over in the American League, the Blue Jays and the Las Vegas Athletics both projected to win 93 games, which would be the best in the American League. Over in our National League, our Rockies projected to win 97, the Pirates projected to win 92. So we're expected to win the National League West again and would have home field advantage throughout the playoffs if the season goes the way that the simulation did. Not surprisingly, not expected to have any of the top 10 hitters in the National League this year, but we are expected to have some big pitching performances. The last 2 Cy Young Award winners, Jesse Hoffmeister and Ray Salas, expected to go 13-7 and 12-7 this year, respectively. Salas expected to strike out a monstrous 277 batters, at least according to the simulation. Hoffmeister 242, so it looks like those guys conceivably might be 1st and 3rd in the National League in terms of strikeouts here in 2045 if they play anywhere similar to the way that this last simulation that gave us our projections here for the 2045 season. And with that, it is time to get this party started, get the season underway. Next time around, we will be able to check in and see exactly how the early stages of this season is going. Mention that with Vera on the roster now, Menivar remains our top prospect, viewed as the number 2 prospect in baseball. He's starting out in Double-A Hartford. Vera, of course, in the majors. And then Manny Hernandez and C.J. Coons, 2 other top 40 prospects in Triple-A Albuquerque as well. So although may have a few holes in the pitching staff right now with Menivar, Hernandez, and Coons all not that far away, feel like the reinforcements are definitely coming to hopefully help our pitching staff if and when we need them. And we will find out how the beginning of this season goes in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.